Hey guys, it's Wanda here with the first of several interviews for the I Am Resolutionary series. As many of you know, I kicked off this series to kind of share my story, but also to highlight the stories of others. So today I have with me holistic vegan coach and culinary artist Rukiyyah Khan, who also happens to be my best friend. So hi, Rukiyyah.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be talking to Wanda and all of you guys.
Awesome, awesome. So we'll hop right in because, I want to keep this pretty quick and snappy, but also informative and give you a chance to really tell your story. So we'll start with the dreaded question. Who are you and what is your story?
Who am I? My name is Rukiyyah Khan. I am a coach, like you said. So I focus on health, especially not just being vegan. And I am a lover of food. So my love for food kind of started when I was younger. I grew up learning how to cook from my grandmothers, and that was their way of showing love to the world. And so as I grew up, I kind of just attached myself to cooking. I've always been one to be in the kitchen and just whip up some stuff for my family. And so it led me to this place of understanding where my food comes from and what I want to put into my body. And in my own health journey, I kind of landed on veganism. I wanted to not only impact my own health, but also to focus on how this impacts the world, the environment, etc. And so now my focus is just helping other people love food, but also to love their bodies at the same time and do so through food. And so I'm an educator too. I came from a background in teaching. And so I love to kind of put all the pieces together of all of my experiences, my passions, and just help other people kind of arrive at their own place of health.
Awesome, awesome. I love how you mentioned kind of, your multi-hyphenatism, but also you mentioned that you learned to cook from your grandmothers. And so I know that especially with older people, they don't necessarily use measurements. They use, a dash of this and a hint of that. And oftentimes, recipes may come with a story. So what role has storytelling played in your work as a coach and an educator and a creative? And how do you convey this through food?
So storytelling is huge because, again, it does come from my grandmothers. And for me, food wasn't just about like, oh, I'm going to cook a meal at that time. It was always about like how they arrived at that particular recipe or how, the food brought the family together. So there was always a story attached to a meal. So my grandmother specifically in Louisiana had gumbo. Like gumbo was her thing. And so if anybody was coming in town, it was like, she's going to make a pot of gumbo. We're going to have some rice and everyone's going to sit around and just kind of communicate their love for each other. And so for me, that's kind of where my story comes from, because I also saw a lot of suffering in my family. And so there's a lot of chronic illness and a lot of just seeing, deterioration over years. And so part of my story is also me arriving at this point of how can I love food, but also kind of transform the outcomes for my family. And my story is that I've been through my own health struggles and I've wanted to find some type of answer that could help me, not only love what I do, but also love my body through what I do. And so, stories are really big for me. And it's really important for me to continue communicating my story to other people. So it's not just buying into this kind of vegan trend that we have going right now. It's really about digging deeper into why we do what we do, why we arrive at the foods we eat. And then how can we change those things to still taste really good, but also to serve our bodies, our minds, our souls, to feed us well, and to kind of interrupt this cycle of disease that we have going, so that we can live these long lives and continue to tell our stories. So it's all tied in together.
I love that. I love that. And so kind of in that same vein, but maybe through a slightly different lens. So you talk about the generational aspect and the stories, and it's crazy that the love is juxtaposed with, the suffering and the health issues. So what role does legacy play in your work?
Yeah, so legacy kind of hit me hard this year. I'm going to tell a bit of my own story, but Type 1 diabetes runs in my family. My great grandmother on my mother's side had it and had her legs amputated because of it. And on my dad's side, my uncle and my dad are both type 1 diabetic. And so this year I was suffering through some crazy symptoms and was rushed to the hospital, and I was diagnosed type 1 diabetic. And so for me, a part of the legacy piece is also understanding what these health outcomes have in that generational aspect. So like what is actually being passed down through our genetics, and then what are we doing on a day-to-day, a week-to-week, a month-to-month, a year-to-year basis to decide that we don't necessarily want to live that same way. And so my legacy in my mind is to heal some kind of trauma that's happened in my family genetics based off of either the foods we've eaten, the lifestyle, the stress, or the combination of all of it, so that when I raise kids, my kids don't have to have these same kind of looming diseases just sitting over their shoulders. And so for me, it's all about what are some of the lifestyle choices I can make so that, you know, the next generation doesn't have to say, oh, all of my family members suffer from something.
Right.
I want them to see me living into old age and to be running around with them and still kicking it. And so I have a very long-term view and lens on, you know, where I want to be, you know, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, however long I can live, you know, and I want it to be a fruitful life, and I want it to be one where, you know, they don't have to suffer. Suffering isn't something that we have to do. A lot of it's something that can be avoided if we just look critically at our daily habits. So that's why legacy is important.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, that's crazy because when you think about, you know, diabetes and being diagnosed with diabetes, you either think it's, you know, early on or later on. You don't necessarily think that you would be, you know, they're in your 30s being, you know, newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so I know that's probably a huge shift. And so let's throw in, you know, your relatively new diagnosis with just the craziness, the roller coaster that this year has been. How has your, or the way that you go about your work shifted as a result of this year?
Yeah, so my work shifted, and it didn't change so much as in it focused, because for me, it was about understanding why being plant-based or being healthy was, why does it even matter? And I think it's hard to communicate that to people who may or may not want to adopt a new lifestyle. It's hard to communicate it to people who are very set in habits, who are very, you know, connected to the way that we live right now. It's hard to change. Change is not easy for anyone. And so for me, this year, it kind of helped me to zoom in and say, not only am I trying to help you shift things just for general health, but specifically so that you can avoid certain diagnoses. And for me now, I work in diabetes prevention, and then being diagnosed with diabetes, it gave me a whole different view of the disease and just how heavy the management of it is. And so for me, it's about what can we do to avoid having to carry this burden? Because it's not something that we all have to carry, but it disproportionately affects African American people. So if it's something that is attacking us as people in a pandemic style nature, then what can I do? Where can my voice be heard? How can I put out content that reflects not only my love for food and my love for cooking, but that also reflects this kind of resistance against this way of life that we have right now that essentially is killing us slowly. And so it's a matter of kind of gathering all of the things and, you know, putting it together in a way that says, like, I'm not going to sink to this. I'm actually going to use it to empower you to know that there's another way.
Right.
And for most people, you know, I'm type 1 diabetic, but for most people, type 2 diabetes is what the big concern is.
Yeah.
And so if I can kind of help people reduce that risk just by changing a few things, and it doesn't have to be an extreme change, then I'm doing what I'm here for. And And I think that's how my year has shifted. It's just that my lens has narrowed. I've gotten more clear on my purpose. And I just care even more about using my voice to say what needs to be said.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So, in some ways, I know it's probably annoying in others, but in some ways, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise to help you kind of narrow in.
Yes. Great blessing. I tell myself so much that there's a level of strength that you have to have after having gone through something, anything traumatic. I'm not the only one who faced trauma this year, but I think there's a level of strength and resilience that comes from it that I appreciate more than the struggles that I have. So,
Love that. So in that vein, shifting gears a little bit, but it's still kind of in that same vein, my kind of slogan with Resolute Rose is, true purpose is where passion and vulnerability and collide. So what roles would you say that passion and vulnerability, because I think a lot of people talk about the passion part, maybe not so much the vulnerability part. So what roles do those two things play in your own pursuit of purpose?
yeah, so I did a lot of shrinking this year. Like, I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of times where I kind of just went into my own bubble, and it was very easy to do so because we're living in a pandemic. So, there's nobody's holding your feet to the fire to do anything or to show up, and that's okay too. Like, I'm saying, it's okay to rest, it's okay to take a step back, but at the same time I recognized and realized that there was a story for me to tell that I was kind of just holding to myself. Even when I got out of the hospital, I think I might have told 4 or 5 people. It wasn't something I really told a lot of people because I also felt vulnerable in the fact that I'm a health professional helping to prevent something that now I have. So there was this dichotomy in my own life where I was like, yo, like, what am I actually going through and how am I going to deal with this? And once I put it out to the world, I felt so much lighter because that was my vulnerability to say, like, hey, y'all, I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z right now, but I'm going to just keep on pushing. Like, I'm not going to let it get me down. And, that journey isn't pretty. Dealing with it isn't pretty. I mean, I've been vulnerable enough to like tell when I have my lows and when I'm feeling like crap and whatever, but I also recognize that that's a part of what makes me me and what kind of brings me back to why I'm doing this in the first place. So that others don't have to do this, so that people don't have to feel like medicine is the only way. What about food? What about lifestyle? What about all these other things we do have control of?
Food is
So,
medicine too.
yes, food is medicine. And so I think that's just how my purpose and my vulnerability have just like not even just collided, but like big boomed this year, where I feel like all of it comes together in this kind of galaxy of life where you're just like, okay, it's all one big mishmash. And now that it's here, it's arrived, I have to do something with it. I can't shrink. I can't just sit down. I can't just say like, I'm going to suffer, woe is me. It's about, okay, somebody else needs your voice. So are you going to use it? And so, yeah, I'm going to use it.
All right. And that's that on that. All right. I love that. And I feel like in a lot of ways, like people they run the other way from vulnerability, but in a lot of ways, like your vulnerability is like that's your legitimacy,
Yeah,
like that's what makes you trustworthy. That's what makes you human.
yeah,
Um, and I'm just gonna share like a little bit of like my past life, I guess. When I worked in healthcare, I worked with folks who were in long-term recovery from different substance use disorders, and like we specifically would not hire people for the particular role that the staff were if they did not have personal lived experience. Not my mama had it, not my daddy, my brother, nobody. No, did you specifically, struggle with substance use disorder and have to come out of that? And like, do you have that primary first-handed, lived experience? And so My point is that, you know, that's your legitimacy. Like, that's the currency. You don't have to have some huge degree. Like, no, I've actually lived this.
Exactly.
So I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah, of course.
yeah. And thank you for your vulnerability now.
Of course. I can be with you now, girl.
um so now I'm gonna shift a little bit further away. So when people hear the word resolute, I'm sure they think about, you know, New Year's resolutions and things like that. And of course, you know, New Year's resolutions, people think of them as gimmicky or temporary, or you just gonna do this thing for a day and then forget it next week. And so with it being December, we're coming, you know, towards a new year. I wanted to get your thoughts on, you know, the difference between a resolution, so, you know, a noun, versus being resolute, which is a verb. Just from your point of view, what would you say is the difference between the two?
Yeah, I actually do this a lot in my coaching. And I think the biggest difference, and I'm going to relate it to coaching, but I'm going to bring it back to life too, is like the difference between a diet and a lifestyle.
Mm,
So a lot of people take this mindset of, oh, I'm going to do this diet temporarily, I'm going to lose this weight, and then I'm going to be happy. Versus the lifestyle approach, which says there are some fundamental changes in my life I have to make. And not only am I going to make those changes, but I'm going to consistently make them for the rest of my life. Now,
right.
that doesn't mean that I'm not going to make mistakes or I'm not going to quote unquote fall off the wagon. But what it means is that there's an underlying commitment to something that I know is going to improve me. And so
Right.
I think that's the difference between like a resolution for a new year and being resolute, is that there's an underlying current of commitment that it takes to be somebody who's resolute. And the methods may change, the goals might look different depending on what part of the year you're in. But at the end of the day, you are committed to some type of self improvement. And so when I look at the career field that I'm in and how I've kind of grown as my own coach, is that I recognize and realize that all of these temporary small things that we think we want to accomplish actually don't matter in the grand scheme of the longer term goal,
Yeah.
which is overall health, which is overall wealth, which is overall just abundance and joy and gratitude. Like, it's a bigger thing than just this one small goal. And so when I look at resolution, that's what I look at, is like, how can I live in this space of continuing to do this for the rest of my life, not just, you know, for 1 year. Like, what does my life look like if I decide to make a change? And that just, it's grand and it's kind of heavy because there's a little bit more responsibility in my mind of using it as a verb. But at the same time, it's something of a challenge. It's almost like step up to the plate, like go, get with it, or get gone type of thing, because like,
Yeah.
not holding back. Like, we gonna do this resolute thing for like a long time. So
Yes, spoken by a true resolutionary herself.
okay.
I love that though. I'm glad you get it.
I do. I do.
All right, so now we're gonna move into what I'll call the lightning round. 3 questions. Answer just the first thing that comes to your mind. So the first question is, what is one book, quote, film, etc., that has directly influenced your journey as a creative?
I'm gonna say A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Um,
Okay.
that book, I actually read it last year, and I don't think it really hit me until this year,
Yeah.
where he was just talking about how we are in this new way of being.
Yeah.
And you can either adapt to the new way of being, or you can kind of be depressed about the old way of being kind of going away. And to have read that book and then to have experienced 2020 where so much changed, and I also am coaching people through that change, and some people are just not able to adapt. For me, it's kind of like, no, this is a time to like step into my creativity, to step into my voice, to like expand into all these other areas, because we have time,
Right.
because we have space, because we have ways of connecting that honestly are healthier. Like, it's not so much like, let's go out and get drunk. Like, it's really more on some, like, if I'm going to connect with you, it's going to be purposeful and intentional. And I've noticed that the way my life has expanded has been so much deeper and so much more profound. And
Yeah.
so for me, A New Earth was just, it just helped me to kind of see it when it's happening.
Okay. Okay. I love that. Um, okay, question 2. What is a non-negotiable part of your day that directly contributes to your work and or well-being?
Yeah, so this year I've kind of like slacked on my routines. I'm not gonna lie, but when I'm on my routine, yoga in the morning is number one. If I do 5 to 10 minutes every day, sometimes 30, this morning I did an hour, but if I do something to move my body, to kind of meditate on the day, to set my intentions, to kind of get those crooks out, my neck is kind of tight, when I wake up in the morning and I do those things, I just feel like a whole different person. And when I do them consistently and routinely, like, I just see how my life changes. And so, continuing, to finish this year and going into next year, like, that's a non-negotiable for me.
Okay. It's always good to get rid of like the old energy from the day before and just start afresh. So you see me like working out my own kinks over here. Love it, love it. Okay. Third and final question, fill in the blanks. My name is, and I am resolutionary because blank.
My name is Rukiyyah Khan, and I am resolutionary because I didn't let this year get me down. I used everything that has happened in my life as a launching point to expand and to continue to just bring what I know to be true to the world, and to hopefully inspire others to really adapt a holistically healthy lifestyle. You might end up being vegan if you want to. If you don't, that's okay too. But just to be better, to improve, to expand, and to continue to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Awesome. I love that. And so where and how can people support your work?
Yes, so you can find me on the gram at Coach by Kaya, formerly Kaya's Plant Based Kitchen, if you used to follow me. And so, yeah, that's the best place to find me. I'm in a revamp of my website right now, so that will be launching next year, as well as a challenge. So in January, I'm going to do a challenge called the Reverse Your Risk Challenge, where we're going to focus on holistically healthy lifestyle. And you'll get a whole bunch of freebies from me, just to kind of get us on track. It's not going to be a New Year's resolution. It's going to be us being resolute in this lifestyle change. So
Yeah.
if you're interested, definitely follow me on Instagram. I'll be posting a lot about it.
Awesome. So I'll, of course, put your information in the video when it goes up, both on my website and on social media. I mean, that's it. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we end the video?
Just thank you for having me. I
Of
feel so excited to just be a part of this project. Of course, I'm going to always support you, but I'm resolutionary because you're resolutionary.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rukiyyah. And thank you guys for watching. This has been, like I said, the first of several installments of the I Am Resolutionary series, interview series. Have a great night or day whenever you watch this. Thanks.